Well, hey, it's Sean P. Neal, the host here at Fringe, and I am so excited to bring you this episode of Lead the People. Now, Lead the People provides you with a roadmap to realizing your full potential as an authentic people leader. And in each episode, Dr. Matt Poepsel, aka the godfather of talent optimization, well, he and his guests are going to explore a wide range of leadership topics and trends. And it's going to be really informative, and I promise you it will be engaging. So I don't want to hold you back any longer. Make sure you get everything you can out of this episode. It'll be packed full of great stuff. Let's get into it.
It's time to lead the people. The show for aspiring leaders at every level. If you want to boost your self-confidence, get noticed, and maximize your impact by leading others, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Matt Poepsel. Ready to lead? Follow me. My very special guest today harnessed lessons learned while leading during a harrowing Hurricane Katrina experience. She went on to become an award-winning international speaker, change agent, and learning leader. As Chief Change Officer and President of the CARS Group, she focuses on equipping organizations and leaders to navigate the people side of change. And she's the host of the Equip for Change podcast and an author of the book by the same name. She is Keisha A. Rivers. Welcome to the show, Keisha.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited too. We just met a couple of weeks ago, and I was so blown away by our conversation and the fast-flowing nature of our talking about strategy and people and change. I just knew I had to have you on the show.
Oh, great. I loved our initial conversation, and I know this will be even more dynamic.
Yeah, and you were gracious enough to send me your book, which is amazing on so many levels. And so I was very happy to have a chance to read that. And one of the things that you write in the book, you say something I found very fascinating. It was change is always, always, always personal. Three always is. And so I wonder if you might just get us started with that. Like, what do you mean by that? That change is always, always, always personal.
So the interesting thing about change, and I told people that I play in the sandbox of change all the time. And, somebody asked me, how do I get into this? And I said, my life has been a masterclass in change. I mean, you go through Hurricane Katrina and you go through all of that. I mean, that kind of puts you right up there. So even if the change that you're experiencing is in a process or a procedure, or it is something within your job where they have to redesign something, it's always personal, because the way we respond to change is always personal. We can never say that it's not personal, it's business. It is always personal, because our default is to protect ourselves. Our default is to feel comfortable. Our default is to want to feel like we belong. And anytime anything throws us out of our comfort zone, it is always personal, because we are always afraid of, what does this look like for me? What is in this for me? How is this going to affect me? So organizations, and in particular leaders, can never forget that change is personal to their people.
Yeah, we do forget all the time. When we are thinking about a big change initiative, for example, within the workplace, we think about the operations that need to change. We think about the new economies of scale we're going to get with our spreadsheets if we just do this, or a new computer system or whatever. What is it that's so deceptive about that? Why do we gloss over the people issues so much?
Well, it's interesting, because people is messy, and if you think about leaders and you think about organizations, leaders are charged with getting a result. They have the goal, they have the strategic plan, they have the outcomes, they have, how much of a market share that we want to capture. What are we going to do in terms of being more efficient? How are we going to service our clients better? What are we going to do with these revenue numbers? They're always being pushed to get a result in a certain amount of time, and their job is to figure out the best way to do it. Everything else you can plan for, you can align with, you can decide, I'm going to look at this contingency plan if this happens. But people, that's the part that's always messy. That's the part that is always personal, even for them. Because if you're not on board with this change, then that's going to impact my ability to be able to be rated as an effective leader so that I can accomplish these goals. And it's like, I don't want to spend the time and the effort that's necessary
Mm.
to deal with this. I would much rather just say, do it and let's move on.
Do it and let's move on. And I agree with you 100%. It's complex, it's messy, it's personal, it's fuzzy, all the things that, a nice rational business with its well-disciplined spreadsheets don't really like to tolerate. But the consequences when we get it wrong are just dire. I mean, we see
Mhm.
so many change projects fail. I've seen teams of people making $50,000 a year unwind a $50 million change initiative.
Yeah.
And it's because we overlooked the people part.
Yeah. And a big part of it, I was talking to someone yesterday and I told them, I said, there's a difference between change leadership and change management. Change management is managing the process. It is looking at the steps we need to take, the plans we need to make, the resources we need to allocate, how much is this going to cost? These are the things that you feel you can control. Okay. Change leadership is all about the people side. It's how do we get people to shift the way they are thinking in order to do something differently.
I love that so much. It's unbelievable. Like, you literally stopped me in my tracks with that. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? And it's so true. And I'm
Mhm.
going to attribute to that every time I use that, because I could see myself using it. I'm going to say, my friend Keisha told me this. And it's so true, because
Yeah.
the whole reason I call this entire podcast Lead the People is I say, don't manage the business when you can lead the people. And it's all
Exactly.
about the fact that, yeah, we manage processes, we manage things, tasks, et cetera, but we lead people. And here you
Yeah.
are saying that too. Change leadership versus change management. Man, gold star. I love that. Now, one of the other things I kept reading the book, and you observed that being familiar with the way things are currently working, obviously we know how things work, and even if they're not working 100%, at least they're comfortable and known, right? But that can mask potential problems or opportunities to do things better. What is it about the familiar that creates this potential to overlook some things?
Well, when you are really familiar with something, you become subconsciously competent at it. You're not even thinking about it in the forefront at all. You're just operating. I mean, like case in point, if you've ever had a hard day and you're driving the same route from work to home, and sometimes if your mind is distracting, you're like looking up and you're pulling into your driveway and you're like, wait, how did I get here? Like I don't remember. Or if you've been driving forever, you don't think about, oh, I have to put my foot on the brake, take my foot off the gas, put my foot on the brake and ease it. Like there are things that you just naturally do. And so when we are really familiar with something, we see what we want to see. We see what we expect to see. We don't see what's there. So a lot of times when you're really familiar with something, our brain fills in the gaps. And because our brain is filling in the gaps, we miss some of the things that are actually missing. Think about it. I mean, if you're writing a book, I mean, you always want to have someone else proofread it. That's why you have an editor, because when you're putting your thoughts down on paper, you're putting out what you think, this is what I want to say. I know this. I am married to this. This is something that I'm really excited about and really committed to. So I naturally know what I meant when I put these words on the page. But if you have someone else read it that's not really familiar with it, then they're going to say, well, that doesn't really make sense to me. Or what do you mean by this? Or why did you put this together in that way? So you always need to make sure that when you are looking at your organization, you have to have a third party come in that is not invested in it, that is not tied to any of the results, and that is not familiar with what you do, why you do it, and how you do it.
I like that a lot. It's unbelievable when sometimes you get a chance to hire somebody new on the team and you say, well, here's how we do this. And they go, why? That doesn't make any sense. You're like, what are you talking about? This is how we do it. You're like, yeah, but what if you did it like this? I'd be like, oh my gosh, I've
Right.
been doing it this way for a long time.
Yep.
So that familiarity kind of lulls us into this sense that, you just kind of, it sounds like almost like going through the motions, or just
Oh, yeah.
you became familiar. And that's why we resist sometimes when we want to change things, whether it's a new process. It's awkward at first. It makes us
Mhm.
feel vulnerable when we have to do things differently, and maybe we're not really good at it, or you see it all the time when we swap out a computer system, or we make some changes to a piece
Mhm.
of software that's going to make us more efficient in the long run, not the short
Yes.
run, the long run. And
Yep.
here comes all the me issues. Well,
Yep.
wait a second, I'm being bonused based on accuracy, and now you got a new computer system, and now I'm not gonna, like, oh boy, here we go. Yeah.
But see, and this is part of what leaders miss. Okay. Anytime you have to build, anytime you are adjusting, adapting, creating something new, you have to build in time for the learning. You have to build in time for what I call the shift of transformation. So when you're thinking about I look at change as a 3-step process. There is the catalyst in terms of the thing we need to address, the issue, the elephant in the room, whatever it is. And then there is, on step 3, the next normal of application. And I don't say new normal because we're constantly, reiterating and iterating. And so it becomes the next normal because we're always growing. What organizations tend to do is they say, this is the issue, lack of productivity. This is the issue, market changes. This is the issue, new product to market, whatever it is. And now here's what we're going to do about it. So you jump from issue to action. Step 2 in the middle is the shift of transformation. That's when you have to get people to think differently so they will do something different. And so the resistance that we get is not just because this is comfortable for me, but the resistance we get is because this is in alignment with the way I think about this. And if you don't allow me time for me to shift the way I think so that now I am open to this is a new way we do this, you're going to constantly have me pushing back from you because this isn't how I think. So this isn't how I do this. And yes, if we are going to evaluate you on certain metrics and we are introducing something that is going to slow down your productivity, if we're introducing something that is going to cause you to feel as if I don't know what I'm doing because I was really great at this yesterday, and now you threw a whole nother system that I don't even understand the language of this thing. I don't have muscle memory yet. I am not effective at it. I can't move quickly through it because I'm still learning it, but yet still you're still holding me to the same standard.
Mm-hmm.
I'd push back too. My bonus is tied to this. Right. Why are you jeopardizing my money? Like, we can't do this.
It's so true. It happens all the time.
Right. We don't build in the learning curve. We don't build in the opportunity for people to shift. We don't build in the opportunity for them to mess it up and to make mistakes because they have to get used to the change.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times too, there's often a difference in risk tolerance, personal drive and these types of things between the senior teams who tend to want to implement these big changes. And they may have been thinking about it for a long time. And then all of a sudden when they made peace to be like, okay, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to invest the 10 million. We're going to replace the computer system. Let's get it done. Go. Come on. We've been talking about this for 6 months. Let's just pull the trigger. Let's go. And then all of a sudden the people who need the time that you're pointing out, Keisha, and they need the safety, if you will, of being able to get things right. They're feeling the pressure like, hey, this thing, you just announced this thing. And now all of a sudden you're pushing it on us. And it's because, that they almost lose twice. Not only are we moving too fast because no one else even knew we were thinking about this until it's here. Now, all of a sudden, the people who need the most time are given the least time. And we wonder why all these change projects unwind.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. Leadership has been talking about this for 6 months. They've talked about the pros, they've talked about the cons, they've talked about different options, they've talked about how this is going to impact the bottom line, they've talked about how this is going to slow down production, they've talked about, other strategic partners, they've talked about it, they've had a chance to shift their thinking about it, they've had a chance to look at all the questions, they've had a chance to get comfortable with it. And then you're like, well, we're behind the 8 ball because we've been talking about this for 6 months. Go do it. And you got to get it perfectly within 3 weeks.
Right.
Come on.
They don't get the benefit of all that 6 months and having those questions and all that. So basically the executive team had the opportunity to develop comfort with the decision. And even if we trust leadership, and it's not that we think that they made a bad decision, but we need time to settle into the change. Yep. And we may not be giving them that. That's, again, the difference between change leadership and change management.
Exactly.
I like that a lot. And you're talking about the shift, the mindset shift. And I love how you call out mindset and this determining factor. Like, is it possible to have a change mindset? Is it possible to create and maybe even get people ready for the shift, or just kind of, you mentioned that there's only a next normal, not a new normal. Should we just be working on developing our change mindset?
Yes. 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 Big letters. Yes.
Up on yes.
And what that looks like is, if you create an opportunity for people to always ask the question, what would success look like if we did this? What would success look like if we increased our profit share, our market share? What would success look like if we could be the first to innovate in a new way. What would success look like if we solve this problem for our customers? If you get people used to asking the question, what would happen? What would success look like if? And then when you give them something new, you tell them this is what success looks like, they start moving away from fear of the unknown and start embracing the possibility.
Okay.
And a lot of times when change management issues or change management, projects go off the rails, it's because people are not able to imagine what success would look like and envision themselves operating in success. They are only stuck in rehashing the fear of, I don't understand, I don't know, this is uncomfortable for me because it is not what I'm used to. So a mindset around change and a mindset that is open to change is one that is constantly asking and answering the question, what would success look like if?
And I think there's this kind of a survival mode that people find themselves in. And if they're operating in an organization that doesn't have a foundation of psychological safety or trust or all these things, a change can throw them into that doom loop like you're talking about. I feel the anxiety, and if I try and I just can't get out of it, versus being able to make that shift to more of a positive loop. And I love the way that you had described that, Keisha, because it's like, I can see myself as the hero of the story. I can see myself being a material part of the success of, whatever the change might be. And I think that's a more of an empowering, you feel more autonomy in that. You can see the pathways for that. You have hope with that, as opposed to being caught in that cycle of, oh, this is just the next shoe to drop. Like, they're changing this now. They're probably going to have a reorg next. They're probably going to do this next. They're going to do that next. And here comes that doom loop. And they feed off of that because you've pressed them into survival mode at that point when you really want them to be in that thrive mode.
Exactly. And I have, I was speaking to an organization last week, and the senior leader said, we brought in this brand new piece of equipment, and it was designed to make things easier for them because, everything that we were doing was hand done. And, we wanted to really give our people a break from all of that. And physically, it was really demanding and taxing. So we brought in this new piece of equipment and we said, hey, this is going to make us more productive. And we thought people would go, yay. And instead, everyone to a person in that department went, oh my God, you're getting rid of all of us.
That's right. That's right.
And nobody wanted they didn't want to learn the equipment. They didn't want to use the equipment. There are some people who are like, yeah, I may know how to do, I'm not even touching that. And then there became the jockeying for position of the people who are like, well, I'm going to master this. So if I have to operate the equipment, they have to keep me. And then they weren't sharing any knowledge with anybody else on their team because they wanted to be the one to keep their jobs.
Right.
And so my question became, what was the conversation around this, adding this piece of equipment? And she said, well, our senior leadership team did. And I said, okay, so what was the conversation with the people that have to use it? And she said, well, they had been complaining about certain things. And so we took that under advisement and we did it this way. I said, so when you introduced the change, did you tell them that the reason you introduced the change was because you heard them say they needed this? They wanted more time. They were feeling like they were getting run down physically, all of these things. Did you approach it from the standpoint of, we're doing this for you and with you, instead of we're doing this to you?
Exactly. We skip steps in our haste. We skip steps. And what you're describing is a very human response. Right. Because even if they had been saying like, oh, my back hurts and this is awful, and why can't they modernize this equipment? Sure, that sounds great. And that's kind of a cathartic way of just sort of blowing off your steam and having some solidarity with other people who also are in your same life circumstance. But as soon as that shiny new machine comes in, now all of a sudden it's a threat.
Yeah,
exactly. When it's not presented properly, to your point.
Right. And that's the one thing. When you are leading people through change, you have to include them in the conversation around the change. You have to help them see themselves in what this looks like for them, not just for the organization. So many times in organizations, when we talk about change based on the organization. Oh, this will make us more profitable. This will make us more efficient. This will make us more streamlined. This will make us more innovative. This is going to make us. And the us is always the company name.
Right.
It is never described in terms of what does it mean for Keisha? What does it mean for Matt? What does it mean for John? What does it mean for Joe? It's never described in that way. And if people can't see themselves in your next normal, they will automatically assume that they are not to be included.
Here's one of the things I learned early on when it comes to leadership. The best leaders know how to build trust and motivate their people. And there are two ways you can do this. The first is to spend a whole bunch of time you don't have fumbling around and trying to figure out what makes the people around you tick. I wouldn't recommend that approach. The better technique is to use readily available tools to fast forward the insights you need so you can spend more time leading and less time playing guessing games. One of my favorite people first tools comes from the Predictive Index. The Predictive Index, affectionately known as PI, makes it easy to understand what each individual on your team needs out of a manager so you can personalize your leadership approach to get the best results. I can tell you with 100% certainty that the PI tools work for me, and they'll work for you too. I was first introduced to the Predictive Index way back in 2007, and it changed my leadership. 10 years ago, I joined the company, and I've been proud to contribute to the development of talent optimization and the PI tools that make it possible in organizations of all shapes and sizes. Using PI, you can coach, motivate, and develop each of your direct reports on their terms so you can move up in your career with less stress. Visit predictiveindex.com to learn more. To make it even easier for you, I'll put a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. I talk about that in the vision section of my book, Expand the Circle, where I talk about the importance of storytelling. When you start to see how, and when you're that much more productive and you're going home to your families and your back isn't broken because we got this new piece of equipment, you're going to be able to show up better in your community, whatever it might be. Or let's say that the machine was going to replace some percentage of the workers. And you're like, we have other opportunities within the firm that now we can reskill you and we can help you take on these new roles that we desperately need to fulfill our collective mission that we're all so excited about. Isn't that a great thing? You know, and we're looking for some volunteers to be in the first wave. There's ways you can accommodate, and being transparent with people to say, yeah, you know what, we are going to get some efficiencies because of this investment we're making in equipment, but it doesn't mean we're walking away from you. We're opening this door. Like if we just are thoughtful about it, we allow the time and the space for that mindset shift, it's going to go a lot better.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that, we're talking about what I would consider to be a level of self-awareness, a level of allowing people to make that mindset shift. And to me, it really comes down to mindfulness. And I talk at length about mindfulness and every opportunity I get, and I won't hear, but it reminded me because I read another one of your tips from your book where you said, stillness builds strength. Stillness builds strength. What can you tell me about that?
So in our fast-paced world where everything is instant and everything is an emergency and you have to get everything done like yesterday, we don't have time to really absorb lessons. We don't have time. We don't create time to reflect. We don't create time to sit in the discomfort. And so, being in an attic, in a roof, in Hurricane Katrina, and you're in the midst of a hurricane and they're all of, talk about the doom loop of what's going on in your head, because it's all, happening around you. You're sitting in the attic and you're watching the water rise beneath your feet and you're hearing the wind rage around you and you're hearing people screaming, outside, and, the corner of the roof is starting to try to lift up, and you're sitting here and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do something. And you can't do anything. You can't go anywhere. You can't distract yourself. You can't, reposition, but you have to sit in the discomfort, and you have to take the time to recalibrate your thinking. You have to shift your own thinking about what's going on. So stillness breeds strength, and it cultivates strength because you don't have the distraction of trying to move away from what is disconcerting to you, from what is causing fear. You can't run away from the thing that's spiraling in your own mind because you just can't. So part of what I I have done as a practice, and one of the things that I teach leaders how to do, is that whenever you get that doom loop, as you call it, or the spiral, as I call it, sit in stillness and ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And keep asking that question until you get to the bottom of what you're afraid of. Once you name what you're actually afraid of, then it's, what can be done about this? And notice I didn't say, what can I do about it? I said, what can be done about it? Because a lot of times when we go through our fear loop and when we go through resistance to change, is because we make everything so personal and we bring it all on us. I have to be the one to fix this. I have to be the one to carry this on my shoulder. I have to be the one to move this needle. But if we say, what can be done about it? Then you're repositioning it and you're shifting your mindset from it being a locus of center control, where if I feel helpless and if I feel like I'm ill-equipped and if I feel like I can't do anything, then all is lost, to what are the options that are out there? And then the last question I ask, what does success look like? And that forces you to start thinking in a different light in terms of, what does it look like when things are the way that I would want them to be? What does it look like when things are operating in the way that I'm at the pinnacle of success? What does it look like when I'm out of this situation? And so when you're sitting in stillness, you get a chance to stop the spiral. You get a chance to really evaluate what needs to be done. And you get a chance to envision yourself in a position of success where you can see the pathway. Like you talk about creating your story, you can see yourself in that new story.
What I love about that advice too is I always preach that we have leaders at every level. I consider an individual contributor to be a leader, certainly middle managers, certainly executives, everywhere in between. So your advice of sitting in stillness is apropos for everyone. So let's say that I'm a CEO and I have to deliver some bad news. I have to maybe make some job cuts, or maybe I'm making a decision that I'm going to acquire our biggest competitor, and people have not liked this company for a long time, but I just bought them, and it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to deliver this news and have everybody be okay with it? As an executive, stillness is where it begins. Mm-hmm. What about I'm a middle manager and I was just told that we bought the biggest competitor? Now I have to tell my own team. Stillness is where it begins. And you're the individual contributor. Maybe you're the person who, I got the shiny new machine that's coming over to take my job. Ooh, still. So it's like, it's great advice, whether we're the catalyst of change, whether we're the mediator of change, or whether we're the recipient of it and we didn't ask for it, but here it is. Like, stillness is always where it begins, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, exactly. Wow. And I love the fact that you gave examples at all levels of the organization, because I believe that every organization, whether we have the hierarchy structure in terms of, this role is responsible for this, and therefore I am leading in this way. But every single person in your organization is a leader. Every single person in your organization has to lead in what I call their zone of influence. You have to.
Which means, by extension, from how you started us, every leader is a change leader. Because we're not talking about change management exclusively. We're talking about change leadership, which is people-centric. And so therefore, if every individual in the organization is a leader, that means they're change leaders too. And they can either stymie that change by saying, told you it wouldn't work. And see how we're slower now. Well, you're exercising a form of influence. It's not the kind that we need, but you have the opportunity, though, to lead regardless of what your role is in the organization.
Yeah. And there are different levels of lead. I mean, there are people who don't have a quote unquote title where they have direct reports and people working it. And they are the real leaders because they have more influence in your organization.
Yeah.
And so leadership is more around influence. It's around, how do you influence people? How do you position people? How do you encourage people and have people shift their thinking about whatever it is that's going to happen, so that they will do things that are going to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I describe it the same way. I say leadership is about inspiring others to contribute their energy toward a collective goal.
Exactly.
Because I like those three components, because that doesn't mean that I had to have the biggest title in the building, or I had to have degrees, or this or that or the other thing. It's like, can I inspire those around me to contribute their energy, because everyone has discretionary energy. They're either going to bring it or not toward that collective goal, because I feel like that's important too. I do think one of the things that you included in the book was a tip that I had not expected to see at all, which I was very enjoyed seeing it, which was this: love yourself enough to trust the process. Boy, I wish I saw that more often in organizations. I never see the L word. Oh my gosh. Love yourself enough to trust the process. Can you tell me more about that?
So here's the thing that I always found is that whenever there's any type of shift that has to happen, and it's going to ultimately make me better in some way, shape, or form. I am going to become better because I'm going to learn a new skill. I'm going to become better because I'm going to learn how to quiet my doom loop. I'm going to become better because I'm going to realize things about myself and about my team that I didn't know. There's always something better on the other side. Always, even in the midst of tragedy. I went through Hurricane Katrina, lost everything literally, got airlifted out, got dropped in a new situation, and then I ended up on this path as a result. There is always some way that you grow, learn, develop. What people tend to do in the midst of change, in the midst of a change process, is that instead of them figuring out ways to support themselves, to love themselves, to be able to understand themselves, they tend to beat themselves up. And if you are already in a in a position where you're like, oh my gosh, they just brought in this new piece of equipment, I don't have the skill to run this. And instead of you saying, okay, here's an opportunity for me to become better. Here's an opportunity for me to learn a new skill. Here's an opportunity for me to work with a different group of people. Whatever the opportunity is, you have to love yourself enough through the discomfort to embrace the process. No, I have this love-hate relationship with working out. I think it's like on some days I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm going to do this and I'm going to be better. And then when I want to have the sweet tea and the brownies and everything else, why am I depriving myself of this? This is awesome. This is awful. But I had to realize that through the discomfort, I need to love myself enough to look at future Keisha and say, this is what I'm working towards. This is what I'm setting up. Because I need to love where I am right now and love future Keisha enough to prepare her and position her for the success that I see.
It's an amazing amount of awareness and compassion and kindness towards this future person, which is not, you're not describing a situation like this is automatically just going to happen, or it's going to be easy or free, or no price has to be paid. But you're saying that the love for future Keisha at this point is large enough to give you enough energy and fortitude to go through what you need to go through to get there. I think we don't always appreciate what we're asking of our people when we want to have these big changes. It takes a lot of energy. What am I doing to restore that energy? What am I doing? And painting a compelling vision of the future can do that. So in the case of like we talked about earlier, a little bit more storytelling around the new machine is going to improve your quality of work and therefore the quality of your life, can create energy that might be able to be tapped into while they go through the learning process and the discomfort and the fear and all those things. If we're not building up any of that energy and we're asking for energy in return, we're going to deplete our people.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing I always tell people: you want to create an environment where your people feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued, and they feel safe. And it's not just physical safety, it's really psychological safety. It's, do I feel safe enough in this environment to express to you when I'm having issues? Do I feel safe enough in this environment to tell you when I'm confused or I'm overwhelmed? Do I feel safe enough in this environment to take a risk and say, okay, you said this machine is going to be better for me. I'm going to trust you and go off on a limb and do this. And so if we're not creating an environment where people feel seen and they feel heard and they feel valued and they feel safe, then they create their own messages. I always say, in the absence of a clear message, people will create their own. And so if you're not telling the story of how this machine is going to help, or you're not telling the story about why you acquired the competitor, or you're not telling the story about how this is going to align with who we are as an organization and what we're trying to achieve, if you're not telling the story and you're not creating a clear, compelling message, I'm going to fill in my own blanks. So in the midst of any type of change, because we all know leaders think through change forever before they pull the trigger.
Right.
So while you're doing that, send out a pulse survey. Ask people, when we look at processing, what would you like to start? What would you like to continue doing? What would you like to stop doing? And what do you want us to start doing? And then take their responses and weave that into the story by using their voices to say, this is how we arrived at this machine and this decision, because when we asked what you wanted and what you needed, you said, these are some of the things we need to continue doing. Well, this machine is going to allow us to continue doing that at a better rate. These are some of the things we need to stop doing. Okay, this machine is going to take us away from doing that piece. These are some of the things we need to start doing. Okay, this machine is going to enable us to start doing this. Then they feel that they are a part of the change instead of the change being done to them.
Yeah, that agency is really coming through. It's they can
Mhm.
see themselves as, playing a material role in the story.
Mhm.
You're right. Nobody wants to be on the receiving end of change in that way. And sometimes it's inevitable that they didn't get to make the decisions. I mean, not everybody gets to participate in some of the big, larger decisions. But I think being part of the unfolding and being part of the change process, that should always be taken into account.
Yes, exactly.
I love that a lot. I love this conversation so much. I'm still blew my mind with the whole change leadership versus change management. It's worth the price of admission alone. But so many great observations. I know you had a harrowing experience. It's devastating when you read it and you feel like you're right there with you. I mean, you can't be, but obviously as the reader, you take us on a journey to show what was going on in your experience, but also how you parlayed that into a change framework and a way and a message that we can do transformation better. We can have a better experience for ourselves and for those around us and for our organizations. It is an empowering story. So
Mhm.
I really appreciate, where you've taken your readers through that book and through your continuing work, which leads me, Keisha, to my last question for you, which is, where can my listeners go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
So the main place is my website, carsgroup.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. You just look up my name, Keisha A Rivers. And we're relaunching my podcast, Equipped for Change. That will be starting pretty soon. And the interesting thing about the approach to the podcast is that there are going to be 4 different formats. So we will have what I call mic side chat, which is pretty much me talking about whatever I want to talk about with regards to change and leadership and, things that are in the news and current events. And then we have a teachable moment. And a teachable moment is really having an opportunity to talk to a subject matter expert around change and really kind of unpack what can you learn in 30 minutes. So they're going to teach you. There is one theory into practice, and that's going to be doing some case studies and really talking about what does this look like in action with your people and what are the things that you can take away to be able to apply. And then the final one is inside the mind of, and we're going to be talking to leaders about their thinking process that they went through as they were navigating and leading a change effort.
Wow.
So it's not what you did, it's how were you thinking about this that caused you to make those decisions. So I'm really, really excited about that. But yeah, my website and my LinkedIn page are the 2 best ways to reach me.
Excellent. Well, listeners, I will include those links in the show notes, so you're only one click away from being able to get in touch with Keisha A. Rivers and learn more about her work and forthcoming podcast. I love the variety that you were describing. Not everybody needs the same thing. We have different on-ramps to get to all the good stuff that you're putting out there. So thanks so much for being with me today. I've learned so much about change and about your personal experience, and I've just always enjoyed the conversations and any chance I get to spend time with you.
Awesome. Likewise. This has been fun.
Here are my delightfully dynamic top 3 takeaways from today's episode. 1. Change is personal. When things shift on us, we're the ones who experience the consequences. When we initiate change that impacts others, we need to heighten our awareness of how they're likely feeling. 2. Next, not new. There is no so-called new normal. Change has always been constant, and now it's happening faster than ever. As leaders, we need to get good at absorbing and leading change. 3. Bring them along. To smooth out the change process, engage those impacted each step of the way. Give them time to absorb change and a means of retaining their agency during and after the shift. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Strong reviews help shows like mine get noticed, and be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss your next opportunity to lead, learn, and live at your best. Thanks for making this investment in your leadership ability, And thanks for sharing this podcast with another aspiring leader who needs to hear it. All right, leaders, until next time, don't just manage the business when you can lead the people.